Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of Free Thought Hour. Now, I have a very interesting guest today, and I've actually got a little prepared intro to read about him. So, here we go. Somewhere here. Wait a minute. Yeah. Michael Smorenburg. He's here to answer the questions about digital currency and free thought. What's the connection? And he says that he is, by the way, he is an author of In Code We Trust. You can see the play on words there. It's about the blockchain revolution, which is governed by rules, but not by rulers. This is all interesting stuff. Michael, come and tell me about it.
Good evening.
How the devil are you?
I'm well, thank you, John. And I've also just followed your path, for the many years we've known one another. Very professional, and you've got yourself, you've got quite a legacy there of people you've interviewed. I feel very honored. Thank you.
Well, I've got to do something to keep me off the street. But let's introduce co-host Tercia, who's also in South Africa. We're near you. Well, relatively near.
Yep,
Not far.
Quite. In South African terms, Worcester and Cape Town are practically neighbors. I thought you were going to forget about me because Michael is so interesting, John.
Would I? I wouldn't dare.
I wouldn't let you. So, Michael, John and I have a little joke running that me as co-host, I'm continually trying to do the colonization in reverse. So tonight I feel more comfortable because I've got a fellow South African on the show with me. So nice to meet you, and nice to see we've spoken on social media. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Tisha. Yeah, and we lost against Ireland tonight, which is heartbreaking.
Well, I'm drinking an Irish coffee on the Irish.
And I've got an Irish passport, if that counts. Max Smorenburg.
So you didn't lose. What you sort of win and lose at the same time?
Yes, couldn't lose tonight.
Good for you.
Anyway, well, here we are. We gathered here today.
Yeah, this isn't a sports program, but I would like to say that the England women's rugby team is through to the semi-final, and the England cricket team is in the quarterfinals of the 2020 down in Australia, or no, New Zealand.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Today I was actually out on a yacht off the coast, and there must have been 50 of us, all blockchain crypto people. Somebody took us out. It was lovely. And we were walking back, and there was a throng of people down at the V&A waterfront, if anybody knows it. And I said, "It's amazing. 18 months ago, we were all locked in our houses, and here we are. Life's normal again. Fantastic."
Yeah.
So, Michael, I want to dive right into it.
Please.
So, are crypto people real or digital?
They're surprisingly real. It's actually, Cape Town's quite a hub. And there are many reasons for that. And I think one of the big reasons is we live with our hearts in our mouths in a developing country like this, because we've got a currency that when I was a boy, 75 South African cents would buy $1, and the other way around. It cost an American $1.25 to buy a South African rand. We're now sitting, knocking on the door of 20 to 1. And at any moment, one of our dumbos in government can say the wrong thing and it'll be 25. So we always living, in the book I actually explore how, or mention, if you live in Zimbabwe, you can be the most intelligent person, highly qualified, hardworking, and whatever you want, and you've got a government that has destroyed the currency to the extent that you can never ever have safety in the rest of your life. You're forced to leave the country because you can never acquire wealth. If you own land, they'll tax you out of it. All of your assets will ultimately be, you live on the poverty line, and there must be very good people living in countries all over the world that have got these currencies that are shot. Ours is on the ropes, and that's what forces people like us on the edges. If you're sitting with pounds and euros and dollars, you don't feel the quickening quite as much as we do.
Yeah,
I know the pound recently took them.
The pound has been up and down thanks to our crazy government recently too. Yeah, but listen, I'm what you might call a digital currency infant, and I suspect that some of our viewers will be in a similar situation. So, how about you start by telling us, what is it? What's a blockchain?
Okay,
John, can I say something before Michael starts? I would like to take one step back, and I wonder how many people understand how currency valuations and fluctuations work in the first place, and how it came to be. We don't have to go into that, but I think it might be interesting, and it might give a scope or some background understanding of how the difference between what is it, normal currency? I don't know, but it's very interesting. I was astonished to learn how that the currency that the fact that we have that the dollar, the American dollar, is today the currency against which all currencies are basically pegged. That hails back to the end of the Second World War, and it was actually a little bit of a scaly. There was one economist it was at the Bretton Woods conference, and there was one economist who negotiated for the United States, and he actually changed the wording of the document. And because it was 1945, well, maybe that might have even been in 1944, because by then they knew that the Allies were going to win the war, and they were already setting up the post-war economy. And they actually, I don't know if you know this history, Michael.
Absolutely. My book. In fact, you're absolutely right, Josh. Before we get into what is blockchain, we need to dig a little bit. Oh, you just made me big on the screen. It's scary. Before we dig into what is blockchain, I think we need to understand kind of what is money, and then we can flow from there, if we may. One of the reasons I'm really talking, while I'm talking to skeptics, unfortunately, this issue seems to be rather politicized. Kind of the right wing, the Donald Trump supporters have picked up on blockchain, are now running with it. And that means if you don't like Donald Trump, then you don't like crypto either, which is really a ridiculous situation. So I just really want to speak to the skeptics and say, just hold your horses and let's study this a little bit. We've got a cat fight breaking out, yeah? Are you guys there? I can only see myself.
Yeah, you can talk. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I only see myself.
Lonely. Would you like to see there? Put us on the side so we can just wave at Michael. I also hate seeing my own face big alone on the screen.
Yeah, scary. I felt all lonely. Well, let's roll back a little bit. You know, our ancestors used to barter, and that's just a coincidence of wants. I might have a sheep, but I need a rowing boat, but you've got a rowing boat, but you want a donkey for it. So it becomes a coincidence of wants, and it's very, very awkward. You can't build a modern society on it. So you need a token of value, a token that holds value. So when shells, if you're living in a place that shells are very pretty, and if shells are not commonplace, if you've only got a few shells around, they become very valuable, and I can trade you 3 shells for the rowing boat, and you can take 2 of them and you can buy the donkey you really wanted. Great. But then somebody shows up who knows where they can get shells, and all of a sudden they flood the market with shells. Funny enough, that's what's happening to our currencies right now. Glass beads were used, salt was used, and so on. So to have a currency, to have an exchange of value or token of value, there's got to be an element of scarcity to it. So glass beads were great, but when the people showed up who knew how to make glass beads, they bought up the entire country and paupered everybody else. We then struck on gold, and gold worked well because gold really is proof of work. It's hard to find and it's hard to process, and then you've got to guard it and you've got to prove that it really is gold. And now we had something that we could use as a currency. But the trouble is, if I leave home in the morning, what am I going to take with me? Am I going to take a little bag of gold dust because I want to buy, coffee and some lunch? Do I take coins? Do I take gold bars because I might buy a motor car? And then I also make myself a target of crime. So I can't really carry gold with me. Gold's a really bad currency. So I put the gold in the bank. and the bank issues me a receipt, and that receipt becomes paper money. So we start to trade in the receipts, which are covered by gold. Of course, banks being banks, the greed set in, and if they were holding, 1 bar of gold, they'd issue paper money to the tune of 10 bars of gold, because they figured that not every owner of the bar of gold is going to come in to get their lump of gold, and they can get away with it. It used to say on our money, it used to say, I promise to pay the bearer on demand, X amount, to the face value of that. If you look at your money, it's disappeared. So you're absolutely right.
It actually gave a weight of gold that the paper money was equivalent to. Yes.
Yes, and sterling, of course, was originally British pounds. 1 pound of sterling, or rather 1 British pound, bought you a pound of sterling. I think
that's silver. Sterling silver.
Sterling silver. And I think it's sort of, I haven't looked at the price recently, it's probably 400 pounds now for a pound of sterling. So, so your currency is devalued down to 0.25%, 25 basis points of what it was originally worth, but that's over several hundred years, fine. Of course, you're quite right about Bretton Woods. Both sides, the Allied and Axis powers, had beaten one another to a pulp, and it was sort of 1940. I don't remember the exact date. It was 43 or 44, but the writing was on the wall. America was coming in, and it was very clear that the Allied and Axis powers had punched themselves out, and were mostly in debt to America. America had been sort of the loan shark that had been funding the war, and was sitting with most of the gold. And so they were the guys, they were the piper, they called the tune, and they set up Bretton Woods, and they made the dollar the world's reserve currency. So everything is plotted against dollars. So they got themselves into a pretty cushy situation where they could print dollars, and largely they could build an economy.
They hadn't been invaded, apart from Hawaii.
Exactly. And they were everybody was in debt to them by the end of the war. America then entered a couple other wars. Of course, they went into the Korean War, and then they went into the Vietnam War. Now, the problem is, when you fight a war, wars are expensive to fight. So you've got to start depleting your levels of gold as you buy in all the resources and and everything else you need to run a war. America was starting to hurt by the end of as they were digging into Vietnam. And 1972, Richard Nixon declared that they are withdrawing from the gold standard, and a dollar, and in fact all other currencies from then on became fiat currencies, pure fiat currencies. The word fiat means by decree. So by fiat means by decree. They decreed that a dollar was worth $1. It was no longer backed by. They took off the words that we promised to pay the bearer, and they just backed it with their own policies. So you've got policies. Each government's got their own monetary policies, and a US dollar and a Zimbabwean dollar are two very different things. People trust the US dollar because they've got a great big navy that will come and bomb you if you don't agree with them. And the Zimbabwean government is, it's a clown show. They think as long as they've got ink and paper, they're going to be rich.
An important point I think we ought to insert here is that people tend to think of currency as being solid. And in fact, it's just a commodity like all the other things you can trade it for.
Yes, exactly.
It works both ways, but people don't think of it like that.
We think of money as very concrete, and if you just read Yuval Noah Harari, then you realize that money is actually trading in trust. And what you said just now about we trust the American dollar because we trust the power of the United States, but we don't have any faith in the Zimbabwe dollar and limited faith in the South African rand, because we don't have faith in the system of that country. So money is actually trading in trust. And that's why when a system collapses, different things become money. If you think about in the Second World War, in the concentration camps and in the POW camps, then cigarettes become the method
Currency.
of currency.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's and I hope that we're going to get to the point where I can connect the concept of trust to this foggy idea of cryptocurrency and blockchain.
Yes.
So I'm hoping that am I thinking along the right lines?
No, you absolutely are. You absolutely are. I mean, you nailed it. It comes down to trust, and Noah Harari is a great student of teaching us that. So anybody who hasn't read Noah Harari's books, for so many reasons, read them. Not the least of which is to understand that that money is a fiction, law is a fiction, culture is a fiction. These are fictions that we need to run societies with, and so on. But we've reached a situation where do I begin to even pick this one apart? We know we've got a situation where every country in the world is in enormous debt. Each country, if you break it down to the individual level, each human being owes untold tens of thousands of dollars or pounds or euros. And you kind of start to scratch your head and you go, well, if everybody owes everybody, then who's collecting? There's somebody collecting.
Yes. So we've got to a situation where instead of being able to point to stuff that we trust and say that's what we rely on as being our concrete standard, we've now got to a point where we're pointing at a hole and saying there's a lot of negativity here. How much negativity can we trust?
Well, the situation that we got ourselves into over the COVID is, and I just use the US numbers because they're much easier to attain. They're well published. Something like 80% of all dollars in circulation were printed in the last 2 years. So you had, the dollar came into being in 1776, and only 20% of the money between 1776 and 2020 constitutes the money in circulation. 80% of it was created in the last 2 years.
And by printed, you don't mean actual cash, do you?
No, it's just created.
Numbers and accounts.
Quite right. Yes, numbers and accounts. Yes.
You see, I wasn't thinking along those lines. I was actually thinking about a note printed on paper with measures to counteract counterfeiters. So
yes,
they pointed that out. So am I right if I say that there's in any case a disconnect between the value of money and something tangible, physical? And it's been like that for a number of years. Am I right in saying that?
In fact, you hit sort of a good point, because they're two terms that we use quite loosely, but they've got specific meanings. There's price and there's value, and they're two different things. The price of anything is what two people are prepared to exchange it for. So, and for instance, at the moment, if we look at the price of cryptocurrencies are extremely low at the moment. In fact, the value of cryptocurrencies is doing nothing but soaring, but the price is an instrument of speculation.
Yes.
And we can dig into all that now.
There's another word to insert into here, because there's also cost, which is another assessment of something's worth.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So now blockchain is a good time to dig into how blockchain actually works. Excuse me while I'm just thinking if this is the right moment to dig into it. All right. Well, let's begin to describe blockchain. Let's begin like this. Our entire modern world depends on databases. Everything in our modern world depends on databases, and if one of them goes wrong, you'll find out what I mean. Identity theft. So all of your details, everything that's owed to you or that you owe to anybody else, all of your qualifications, your licenses, your certificates, They're all sitting in databases, and those databases are typically run by a central computer. Each one of them is run by a central computer.
Michael, sorry, I want to ask. I've been helping my students with computer science, and I've been doing a little bit of research about the history of the internet. If I drill down that data, so my certificate, my ID document, all my documentation, for example, it sits in a databases, and if I take that databases apart, that actual document is represented electronically in terms of
Yes.
noughts and of zeros and ones and
Yes.
different. So, and is that right? Do I have the picture in my mind that all those zeros and ones that make up a piece of information is stored in a databases somewhere, physically,
Yes.
which is a physical place somewhere in different locations in the world?
Yes. So typically, they centrally, a central authority governs your driving license. So your name appears in a database in the driver's license issuing authority. Your passport exists somewhere. Your vote or you in the voter roll exists somewhere. Of course, you've got credit, you've got credit rating, and you've got bank accounts, and you've got what people owe you. And each one of these typically sits inside of a supercomputer somewhere. And these are generally single points of failure. The organizations are spending sort of 30% of their IT budgets are spent on trying to keep bad actors out. Bad actors aren't always from the outside in. We live in a fairly corrupt environment where if you've got the right amount of money and you speak to the right person and you want a driving license, it can be arranged. So keeping bad actors out doesn't necessarily just mean hacks from the outside in. It's also hacks from the, or rather manipulation and fraud from the inside out. So keeping sorry, I'll just adjust that. Keeping information safe in databases is a really, really important issue for modern human beings in a modern society. If you look at America right now, all the squabbling that's going on and on and on about the voting could be solved with blockchain. So with that statement out of the way, let me try and describe in very, very layman terms what blockchain is. Yeah. And let me just use Bitcoin as the sort of the main example of how blockchain works. Somebody going to ask something?
Not now. I'll raise my hand.
All right.
Oh, you want me to have a go? Sorry, I wasn't. I took your question to be rhetorical. Blockchain, as far as I understand it, it's a distributed ledger. So many computers have that information in their storage facility, and the thinking behind that is you can't corrupt all of them or lose all of them at the same time. There's too many records for it to be lost or damaged.
Exactly. So let's just rewind ourselves to 2009 when Bitcoin got rolling. Bitcoin, the way the software works is that it's run by nodes, and nodes are just a fancy word for computers. You as an entrepreneur can go out and buy the equipment to run a node, and you can install it and download the software and put it up onto the network, and now you're a node. Approximately every 10 minutes, a block of information in the ledger, think of a block as a page. All of the activity that has occurred on the network in the previous 10 minutes will be written up into a block. At the end of the 10 minutes, that block has to be sewn up, for want of a better word. Encrypted. Sorry?
Refreshed.
Yeah, confirmed. So we come to the end. We come to the end of a block, and we confirm all of the transactions that occurred over the last 10 minutes, and that then gets encrypted and gets distributed out to the entire network. So the entire network and the Bitcoin network at this stage stands at about 12,000 nodes spread all over the world. So 12,000 computers all record all of the transactions over the last 10 minutes. Identical copies.
Can I offer an analogy for this? Because I use Google Docs, and as you know, they can be shared. And so you can give permission to other people to edit them. And sometimes I'm editing my Google Doc, which I own, but I've shared it with somebody, and I can see them in there editing it as well from their wherever they are on the planet.
Yes.
And so it seems to me that that's a bit analogous, because there's this connection through the internet to other people, other places, and there's this refreshing every few minutes going on. Is it a useful way to think of blockchain?
Yes, that's very much a useful way to think of it. Of course, we get to the end of the period of the period of transactions occurring, which would be analogous to the people who are working on your document, and you get to the end of that page and you want to sew it up, because that is now needs to be archived, put into the archive. So you have to have a mechanism to decide who. There has to be one single computer that draws it up and makes this is final, encrypts it, and then distributes it to everybody. So this is where the genius of Bitcoin and blockchain really comes to the fore. How do you make that decision out of the 12,000 nodes that are participating? How do we know? Are we going to go in alphabetical order? Are we going to go by country? It's a very difficult one to do, and this is where the term proof of work, the concept of proof of work, comes from. As all the transactions are happening, or prior to the transactions happening, the software sets a mathematical equation for all of the computers on the network to solve. The software does that according to how much computing power is on the network. So the software itself can see how much computing power is sitting on the network. It sets a mathematical equation that will take approximately 10 minutes to solve. It may take 7, it may take 9, it may take 15 minutes. But at some point, one of those nodes is going to put up their hand and say, bingo. The software is going to check it and say, "Oh, okay, you did get it right." And for that, they will get newly minted bitcoins. So in 2008, they would pay 50 bitcoins for having solved that mathematical problem, and then their obligation is to be the banker who consolidates the transactions, writes that block into encryptation, or encrypts it, and distributes it to everybody else. The software sets a new mathematical equation, and it all begins again.
Yeah. So you've got a calculation required to verify this account, this particular block of.
No. The mathematical equation is actually playing rock paper scissors. You're actually playing rock paper scissors.
Yes. It's a task that's set, that's not really got anything to do with the actual digital block that you want to save.
No,
but
just to see who wins the tombola.
Yes, and the winner gets paid for doing that task in these notional items of money.
Well, in fact, the winner gets paid for the task of being the banker for that 10-minute block of consolidating and doing the encryptation. So that's the block.
It's only that block that computer has got paid for, and then in the next few minutes, a new block will be offered out with a new puzzle for the computers to solve, and that might be won by somebody else.
Yes.
And so the whole thing is scattered about the internet.
Yes. So it's completely randomized.
Can I ask, does the value come in with the page of information? So if I go back to John's analogy, sorry, I'm a bit lost.
No. If you let me, I know exactly where you are. Let me explain this. Okay.
I'm so glad you know, because I have no clue.
No. It's gonna come together now. It really is going to come together now. It's actually fairly simple. You've got transactions happening all the time, and those transactions need to be codified and put into an archive. Just like any ledger needs to be, you have to come to the end of the ledger and turn the page, and that turning of the page is drawing it up. Somebody has to do it. Now, if you are going to make that in a predictable fashion, you create the opportunity for fraud, because if I know it's going by alphabetical, and I know I'm coming up. I'm doing the next, the third block in 2 blocks time and 1 block's time, and then it's me. I can do some fraud, and I can write that block in such a way that it is to my advantage. So by randomizing it, especially when there are 12,000 nodes out there competing, and every 10 minutes somebody wins, and the ones with the best computing, with the greatest computing power, have got a better chance of winning, but they're not necessarily going to win. The usage of the electricity is only there to is as a randomizing effect, create a randomizing effect. Let me just explain quickly what the chain is. At the end of when each block is encrypted, the summary of that block is written into the header of the next block. And at the end of that block, the summary of that block is written into the header of the following block. So you've got this endless chain. In fact, you can think of it more as almost an onion. It's almost like onion skin. So the further and further, or the more and more blocks that are added, the deeper down a transaction was, the less chance it's ever got of being altered. And in order for somebody, if I'm a hacker and I want to hack in and move, I've got 0.1 of a Bitcoin, and I want to claim, actually I've got 1 Bitcoin, and I hack into the system and I make that one change. I've got to decrypt and break into a computer to make that change, but I have to break into more than 51% of all of the nodes on the. So I've got to break in at this stage to 6,000 computers, to more than 6,000 computers simultaneously, and break into all that encryptation and change it, because the software will just overwrite anything that I do. So the result that Bitcoin in 12 years has never had a counterfeit and never had a double spend.
So what you're saying is that you, as a hacker, might be able to, with great difficulty, get your way to 1 block, but then they would not have the URL. You didn't name it that. You said it's the heading of the chain, but I'm thinking of it as a URL that would take them to the next link.
Well, you can go and look at every single transaction that's ever happened in Bitcoin's history is in the public domain. You can go and see exactly which wallet sent what to whom and when. That's one of the great strengths of it. Is if we were using this not for accounting and money, we were using it for voting. All of this nonsense going on in America right now would be over with, and of course that's why the politicians would never want it. Because
to answer Tertia's question, because she wanted to know where the value came in, and I would say it's not yet. It hasn't happened yet. All we're doing is tossing tokens around, and they will only acquire value when somebody trades them, and then we'll know what they are considered to be worth.
Yes, well, you're quite right. So what happened in the early days, every 10 minutes, 50 Bitcoins were created and handed out. Well, of course, there were probably 10 nerds in the whole world that were competing at that stage, and there were not very many transactions happening. So your laptop, while you were asleep, your laptop could be churning away and could be earning you 50 Bitcoin, 50 Bitcoin, 50 Bitcoin. You'd wake up in the morning to 500 Bitcoins or something, because you're only competing against 10 other guys. And these were nominal. They had absolutely no value. But as the network started to grow, and we're now sitting at 12,000 nodes, we're sitting at, if you've looked at what a Bitcoin mine looks like, if you looked at what nodes look like, I mean, these things are aeroplane hangar sized. They are absolutely enormous. To give you an idea, Bitcoin as a network is 100 times the size of Google. So Google is a massive network, and crypto and Bitcoin is 100 times bigger. Put a different way, if Google decided to turn their business model into into mining bitcoins, they'd only impact the Bitcoin infrastructure by 1%.
Yeah. There'd just be a cent in the game, wouldn't they? Yeah.
Yeah.
But you also brought in the word mine here. You talked about a Bitcoin mine. What is that? Is that the amount of information owned by a node, or what?
No, a mining Bitcoin is exactly what we're describing now, which is trying to find that elusive, the answer to that elusive mathematical equation that the software set. So the software is constantly monitoring the entire Bitcoin ecosphere for how much computing power is on it, and it's setting mathematical equations according to that. That will take approximately 10 minutes to solve. Sometimes they may be solved in 2 minutes. It might take 20 minutes. On average, it takes 10 minutes. Then in 2012, the 50 Bitcoins that were handed out every 10 minutes became 25. In 2016, it became 12 and a half. And in 2020, it became 6.25. So as we speak now, there's 6.25 Bitcoins that are newly minted every 10 minutes. In 2024, this is called the halving. In 2024, it'll halve again, so it'll go down to 3 point a fraction, and it'll just keep going. So the very last full Bitcoin will be mined in 2140, in 120 years' time. The last full Bitcoin will be mined. So the Bitcoins are paid out to the miners, and the miners, unlike gold miners who dig and find gold and generally sell their gold immediately to defray costs, Bitcoin miners tend to not want to sell their Bitcoin. They cling on to their Bitcoin for all it's worth. They'd almost rather go out of business than give up their Bitcoin. And the value of Bitcoin, so the value of the network is that I could send you $100 million right now, this evening, and you'd have it in your wallet in 5 minutes time, and it would cost the transaction would cost me $1. And I wouldn't have to ask permission of anybody else. There would be no delay. It's 10, 11 o'clock on a Saturday night, and we could do that transaction, and guaranteed 100% it'll land in your wallet. So that's the power of it. The power of it is the speed and the efficiency.
So Michael, can I become a Bitcoin miner?
No, because I'll tell you why you can't. Because you live in South Africa, and the reason that you can't is because our electricity costs about 16 or 18 US cents per kilowatt hour, and to be a profitable Bitcoin miner, you need to buy it under 2 cents a kilowatt hour. So yes, you can be, but not here. If you want to be a Bitcoin miner, you'd have to go where electricity is really cheap, and the only place electricity is really cheap is where there's surplus. So you're either going to have to buy it as a buy of last resort, when nobody else wants to buy it, or you're going to have to go where there are renewables. So the entire hoopla about Bitcoin using so much electricity and bad for the environment is complete and utter tripe. It uses a lot of electricity, yes, but it's all renewable energy, and in fact, it's going to create enormous breakthroughs in renewables because you're digitizing, or you're putting a value on energy. It's valuing energy and digitizing energy.
So, are you listening, Steve? Hydroelectricity is good stuff.
Yeah. So what's happening in places like Iceland and Canada and Russia? You're able to mine because you've got renewables. They've got a lot of hydrothermals. There's cooling is not an issue, because that's one of the big problems is cooling these facilities, and then they're piping that heat away, and they're growing greenhouses with it. So it's an extremely productive environment.
So we still haven't managed to bridge the gap between these digital concepts and actual physical objects that we might wish to purchase. How does that And the reason I'm asking that is because I've got a news item in front of me here that says it's today, published today. Oh no, published last year. Tesla buys 1.5 billion in Bitcoin and plans to accept it as payment.
Yes, they did that, and then Elon Musk's playing a funny game, and nobody can quite work out what's going on with him. We have to also delineate, right? I'm going to come to that answer. We have to delineate here. Bitcoin is a unique product that will never ever exist again in the history of the world. It cannot, and the reason it cannot is because we now know that there's a thing called digital scarcity. But Bitcoin created for the first time digital scarcity, and now that we know it exists or it can be created. And it can be highly decentralized. The strength of Bitcoin is it's so very decentralized. There's no single authority that can stamp it out. In fact, China's banned everything that's come from the West. And if China, if you live in China, and my cat's about to jump on me, so please excuse. If you live in China and they've banned it all. Sorry, it's very. It's his time of evening. He wants me to go to bed. It's his time of evening. He wants to go to bed. In China, they banned YouTube, they banned WhatsApp, they banned Facebook, and every time they launch their own version. Bitcoin, they ban Bitcoin every week. And the answer, the reason is because you can't actually ban it. As long as the internet exists, you can't stop it. It keeps going. It is it's the most distributed network in the world, and it can't be dominated by anybody. So there's no single authority who can come in and dominate it. And now I did promise, and this little character threw me off. I did promise I was going to get to your question
about Tesla.
Yes. So Elon Musk, of course, he was speculating there. He bought $1.5 billion worth. He sold off 10%. He said it was to test the liquidity of the network, which nobody really believes. He's playing a game. There's another coin called Dogecoin, and Dogecoin's got absolutely no fundamentals. It's got no development. I could speak for hours on Doge alone. The only thing it's got going for it is that for whatever reason, Elon Musk loves Doge, and it looks like he wants to know. Sorry, this little guy's discovered a packet, and he's going to create havoc if I don't take it away from him.
While you're quelling your cat, I wanted to say, if the numbers of computers, the numbers of nodes that get involved in this continues to expand in the graph that has been going on.
Yes.
Are we going to end up with everybody's computer involved in this transaction, in this creation of
it's very self-regulating because it's sort of a perfect economy, because if you want to become a Bitcoin miner, you've got to sit down. If you want to mine whatever you want to mine, you've got to find rich seams of. So if you want to mine tin or gold or lead, you've got to find where the richest seams, and you've got to go there. And the world doesn't always make it convenient for my dog's now barking out back. There's plenty of distractions here. Don't
worry, we've got fireworks going on here. Of course, okay. It's November the 5th.
You've got to go where the richest seams are. Well, in terms of Bitcoin, the raw material is electricity. So for Bitcoin, you've got to go and mine where the richest seams of electricity lie, where you can buy the cheapest electricity. That's where you can go and mine Bitcoin. The beauty of it is it's very hard to move electricity over long distances. But Bitcoin mines, you can put them inside of a container, and you can take the container to wherever you're welcome, politically welcome. And do your mining there. You're not going to be welcome if you're going somewhere that you're competing with other people who need the electricity. So that really makes you the buyer of last resort. So the short answer is yes, we're going to see Bitcoin mines is going to just follow the supply demand graph. There are going to be less and less Bitcoins minted, more and more people fighting for them, and that drives the price up and the value up.
Michael, do we know who started Bitcoin?
That's quite interesting. There's a name attached to it. Satoshi Nakamoto is the founder, but nobody knows who the person is. The first million bitcoins that were all the Satoshi acquired about 1 million bitcoins through the mining process in those very early days, and the wallet holding those bitcoin has not one single bitcoin has ever left those wallets, and there's a lot of speculation that Satoshi's actually dead. Nobody knows who it is. It's rather an interesting thing, and that in terms of religion. What's the word that was used for it, like promulgated? What's the word that religions that use when sort of God-given law? The prophet says this and the prophet says that. What is
Revelation?
the word?
Revelations?
Revelations. It's very important to a Christian what Jesus said, or to a Muslim what his name?
Prophet Allah.
Yeah, this is very Joseph Smith. What did Joseph Smith say? This is all important, and of course they will always call us evolutionists, and they'll always say, they'll always try and act as though Darwin was some kind of a that we will have that same reaction. Whatever Darwin said is gospel, and it's more Bitcoin's more Socratic. The engineering is sound. The engineering is brilliant, and that means it really doesn't matter who the person was that created it. It's Socratic of nature, rather than
the reason I
see it.
So who writes the code? I think I'll have to sit at your feet for a proper lesson, because
no. You know what? The problem is it's a big subject, and I'm not a very good talker. I'm a pretty good writer. I'll put a book in your hands, and I promise you'll understand it.
I can't wait. But don't feel bad. I've listened to podcasts. I haven't read books about it, but I've been trying my damnest to understand Bitcoin, and nobody's been successful. So just join the club.
I'll be successful. I'm sorry. There's one person that you should really listen to, Michael Saylor, and that's Saylor, Saylor, Michael Saylor. And Michael Saylor,
Saylor.
Yeah. He is the founder. He's founder and chairman of MicroStrategies. He's, in my opinion, going to be one of the wealthiest person in the world one of these days. He started buying Bitcoin when we got hit, when we all went into lockdown. Let me back up here. He was an MIT. He's an MIT engineer, and in 2014 he was shown Bitcoin, and he dismissed it. He said it's garbage. When COVID lockdown happened, he was sitting with $500 million in his treasury, and he said, my God, they're going to start printing dollars, and that's going to erode the value of the dollars I'm holding. What do I want to buy with this? Do I want to buy land? No. Do I want to buy shares? I don't think so. Do I want to buy gold? No. And he went down the list, and he got to Bitcoin, and he studied it. And as an engineer, he said it's the best money that humans have ever designed. And the guy is just absolutely incredible. He's just super the way he explains things. Michael Saylor, there he is. Absolutely fantastic. There are quite a few of them.
Michael, can you tell me the title of your book so that we can send people to it?
In Code We Trust.
In Code We Trust.
No.
Code We
If you
Trust.
ever look, where is it there? You can see there's sort of a shadow of God.
Oh, I see. Yes, that's a good design.
I'm playing off the American money. It says "In God We Trust" on American money, and that hasn't worked out all that well. Just on that note, they talk about that America particularly has got terrible inflation, and we've all got even worse inflation. The fact is that America doesn't have inflation. They've got currency debasement, and the difference is inflation is defined as more, demand outstripping supply. Well, the strange thing is we all got locked down. We weren't going to restaurants more. We weren't traveling more. We weren't burning more fuel. We weren't going to more hotels. The economies of the world ground to a halt. And yet the stock market soared. Why? Well, it only soared in dollar terms because they pumped money into the system. If there are three of us sitting here, and if there were three oranges, and I've got more money than you, I might want to buy two of the oranges, and somebody's going to lose out. If they dump 30 oranges in the room, I only want 3 oranges at most. So the value of oranges goes down. If the same thing here, when you dump money into a market, the value of the money goes down. So it just costs you more money to buy the same thing. And that doesn't mean that you've got inflation. That doesn't mean there's too much demand. It just means that you've got too much money sloshing around in the system.
You've devalued your currency.
Exactly. And governments, it takes money to run a government. So where do they get the money? They tax us for it. Politicians want to be always the politician that I cut the taxes. Trump did that. He cut the taxes. Well, he didn't cut the costs. The government's still got to come up with money to pay for it. So what do? The printing presses go, they just print more money. And the wealthy people, the wealthy people of the world are sitting with assets, and the value of the assets just keeps going up. And the poor and the middle class have hold cash, and we get diluted.
People should notice that if you live long enough, you notice the value of your house going up, but it's the same house. Yep. It can't have any intrinsically greater worth. What's happened is the value of money has gone down, so the numbers that describe the price of your house are now bigger.
Yeah, and that's currency debasement. That's not, and the cure for that is not, and the cure that the Fed is trying to apply is by trying to strangle demand. Well, that's not going to help. Just one thing that I haven't also made clear is $1 is made up of 100 cents. 1 Bitcoin is made up of 100 million Satoshis. So Bitcoin, we really shouldn't talk about Bitcoins. We should talk about Satoshis. With our little lowly South African rand, even with 1 South African cent, you can buy 3 Satoshis. So where
do I go to buy Satoshis?
We've got, in fact, funny enough, you mentioned that. Somebody who read my book has turned me into the chief commercial officer of their company, and we're putting in ATMs, rolling out ATMs all over the country. So you literally, if you take your green cash and you go up to an ATM and you feed it into the machine, it stores the rands or the pounds or the dollars. It stores them as rands, pounds, or dollars. With a Bitcoin ATM, it's exactly the same thing, but I feed in rands and I buy a digital asset of some kind. I can buy a US dollar digital asset, or I can buy Bitcoin, or I can buy Ethereum. Just on that note, all cryptocurrencies aren't chasing the same thing. So Bitcoin is digital gold, is really taking the place of gold, because you can move it at light speed. There's a ready market running 24 hours a day. You always know what it's worth, and it costs you nothing to transact. Unlike gold, if I want to sell you a kilo of gold, I've got to get it from me to you. It's got to be guarded, and we've got to prove that it really is gold. I can move you that equivalent value now this evening in seconds. What's really interesting? Sorry,
don't invest in one coin, because there was a digital currency. I don't know whether it's still around, but it was a scam, and the woman. You liked it?
No. There are about 20,000 digital currencies right now. Most of them are complete garbage. Don't go near them. Go look on market cap, get into the top 10, leave the rest alone.
The woman who did that one, and there's been a whole series of podcasts about her. She's disappeared, and there was no blockchain, and she is now known as the crypto queen.
Yeah, and that's unfortunately, when South Africa had a gold rush in the 1800s, and on the one side of the country we had a little town called Pofadder. You've never heard of it because they didn't find gold there. And then we had Barberton, and Barberton, there was gold. Now in Pofadder there were probably there were your normal mix of criminals. There weren't particularly a lot of criminals, but if you went to Barberton, the mountains were crawling with them because they were attracted by the wealth. And it's the same thing with crypto. This is a gold rush, and there are people trying to take your earnings off you, and one's just got to educate oneself. This is the bit of the Wild West days, and it's the upside is that there's a lot of money to be made. The downside is there's a lot of people who want to make money. But education is everything. So educate oneself and avoid the baddies.
So Michael, I have heard not rumors perhaps, but I have heard on financial radio programs in South Africa that they are looking at regulating Bitcoin trading in South Africa. What are you? I'm not sure about in the UK and the United States, whether it's being regulated anywhere.
It's a very good thing. It's a very good thing. Already on your tax forms, there's a question: do you own cryptocurrency? And you can say no. But then if they catch you, you're for the high jump because you declared no. So there's already that, and it's just part of its evolution is that it ultimately will be regulated, and that's a very good thing. That's not a bad thing.
We're coming up to the end of the hour, so I want to get you to speculate now, Michael. This currency, is it going to become a world currency, world currency? Is it going to supplant banks and governments? Is it just going to be
to some degree? Yes. Well, we need 10 more. This has been off to a bit of a stuttering start because I'm not a very good presenter, but perhaps we can come back together again and talk. But the short answer is yes, because Bitcoin is not just digital gold and it's got scarcity. It's also a settlement layer in and of itself, which gold isn't. Gold's not a settlement layer. So Bitcoin does.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. It's not a
settlement layer. So in other words, we need a third party. If I want to send you Bitcoin tonight, if I want to send you rands, I can't send them on a Saturday night. Yes, I can do the transaction, but they won't hit your bank account until Tuesday. Okay. Because it's got to go through that very old-fashioned system of, the checks and balances, and that's my cat headbutting the computer. It's got to go through the checks and balances.
Okay.
Whereas Bitcoin is it's software and it clears itself. It's trustless money. You don't need anybody in between. I can see you looking at your watch. So the short answer is yes. I think what will happen is you'll see most of the world's smaller currencies collapse into the bigger currencies. So you'll find most of Africa will be working with dollars and possibly yuan and I think that the bigger currencies will then start to back themselves the same way they used to back themselves with gold. They'll back themselves with Bitcoin. That's my. Look this up. You're going to think I'm barking mad. Fidelity are one of the largest companies in the world. I think they manage trillions. It's $8 trillion or $12 trillion worth of assets that Fidelity manage. Look up Fidelity. Their speculation of Bitcoin's value by 2037 is $1 billion per Bitcoin. That's $1 billion with a B dollars per Bitcoin. I'm not making this stuff. Just go and type in Google Fidelity $1 billion per Bitcoin. It will be a yes. So the short answer is hook in and hold on.
Amazing.
Last question. Can I ask the last question? In 2 minutes, Michael, what's the greatest threat to cryptocurrency?
Lack of education and people confusing it because they're coming out with central bank digital currencies, which are nothing but the same fiat currencies we've always used, except it's intelligent money. So they can reach into your wallet. I can pay you, and if the government decides that you personally they don't want you traveling, they just shut down. You can't spend that dollar on anything else. So I would say that's the biggest thing is lack of education, lack of understanding, and lack of trust. yeah, that would certainly be the biggest.
So
as
if
far as
somebody
that-
breaks, what about if somebody breaks the internet? If all the satellites go down and we don't have any more internet, is Bitcoin then
yeah,
broken?
well, it'll come back, but I think we'll have bigger problems than worrying about our money. We won't.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, I
so
think
much,
this has
so much
been
left unsaid.
fantastic. Sorry?
No, there's just so much left unsaid. There's 10,000
Yes,
things
yes.
cramming into my head.
Yes, well, it needs another 2 or 3 hours, but that's against the rules.
Well,
so
invite me back. I'll be here.
yes, we will, definitely. Thank you for offering. It's been utterly fascinating, and thank you for giving us this little chat, Michael. We will get you back when our heads are recovered from the barrage that you've just given us.
You know what I'll do is next time let's if we do this again, I'll write up and I'll make it a page or two of explanation.
Yeah.
That we can begin with, and we can launch from that. Everybody who wants to watch the podcast can be up to date on that.
Great.
And I have a whole list of questions for next time. I've been making copious notes.
Tercia, I was going to ask you to promote next week's show, because it's your guest that you've arranged. You're the victim you've called Dibby.
Oh, yes. Debbie Breitenbach. Michael, she's also an author. She hails from my hometown, Vryheid, in northern KZN, but she has risen to almost celebrity status in Afrikaans writing. I think she will soon be very popular in English as well, if she gets her books translated. Debbie has worked most of her life as a public prosecutor. She has very many interesting stories to tell, and she's emerging as a very popular writer of crime fiction. And I'm friends with Debbie on Facebook, and she's very funny. And I'm looking forward to speaking to somebody who hails from my hometown. So I haven't met Debbie, but yes, please join us for South Africa's female crime writer with murder on her mind.
Excellent. We'll all be there for that. Thanks, folks. And thank you, viewers. Thank you, future viewers. And having heard what's coming, I'm hoping we'll see you next week. Say bye-bye.
John, thank you. It's well
Bye.
done. You've done incredibly well with everything.
Nothing.